Velkommen til Dagsorden fredag 29. oktober. Med oss i dag har vi presidenten for Solari Inc., utgiver av Solari-rapporten og administrerende medlem av Solari Investment Screens LLC. Hun har tidligere jobbet som administrerende direktør og styremedlem i Wall Street-investeringsbanken Dillon, Reed & Co. Inc., som assisterende sekretær for bolig og føderal boligkommissær ved USAs avdeling for bolig- og byutvikling i den første Bush-administrasjonen. Og hun var president for Hamilton Securities Group Inc. Hun har 25 milliarder med transaksjoner og investeringer bak seg, og har ledet portefølje og investeringsstrategi for 300 milliarder dollar i finansielle eiendeler og gjeld. Welcome, Cathrine Austin Fitts.
It's great to be with you, and I'm so looking forward. This is going to be my first time in Norway.
Oh, we're delighted to have you, and we'll come back to the events that's coming up Monday and Tuesday in Oslo and Stavanger. But first things first, you've been around the financial world for a minute or two with an impressive resume, with an extensive list of accomplishments. And I want to take you back to the basics, Cathrine, because I want to make sure that we get down to the nitty-gritty, because we're facing a new financial system, and we'll get back to that later on. But first things first, what are the problems with fiat money, and what happens if that money system fails?
So the number one problem we have is not a financial problem, it's a governance problem. We have a secret governance system. We're not allowed to know, so I call the secret governance system, my nickname is Mr. Global, for want of a better word. Some people call it the committee that runs the world. And the financial system is simply a part of that governance system. And you never want to talk about reforming or changing the financial system without it informing the governance system, because you could make the secret governance system problem worse. Okay? And if you look historically, fiat currency in and of itself is not a problem. The way it's managed by a secret governance system can be a problem. The number one problem we have with the current currency system is a debt-based currency. So, a lot of times we refer to the problem as being fiat, when in fact, it's the fact that we're using debt in a way that puts sovereign governments in a debt trap. And that allows central control.
How does that work to put in a debt trap? What does that mean?
Let me give you a perfect example. If you look at the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. Treasury could just simply issue currency if it wanted to pay its bills. But rather than issue currency, it borrows money through debt. And so as of a few months ago, officially, the United States government had $33 trillion of debt. And as interest rates were rising, that was putting it in a debt trap. And if you go around the world, many countries in the world, the sovereign governments are in that debt trap. And that is what is compromising their sovereignty and making it easy for the bankers to control them. But in fact, the U.S. Treasury could simply issue $33 trillion of currency. They don't need to issue debt to create that currency. And in fact, we know that was one of the controversial issues. President Kennedy was the last president who tried to authorize Treasury issuing the currency directly. And we know it was not that long after he authorized that he died in Dallas in 1963. So I would say our problem is not that we have a fiat currency. We have a fiat currency that's debt-based, and we have a secret governance system managing it in ways which are secret and, in fact, are above the law. So we know, in fact, that the BIS and its sort of organizations that it operates with enjoy sovereign immunity and are literally above the law.
So how does that work, Cathrine? Printing money is said to be one of the big issues, like you just printing and printing and printing, right? If you move I guess you could say, ownership of the currency from the central banks to a government institute or something like that, wouldn't we have the same type of problem? And could we just issue that debt? How does that work? Wouldn't that make the currency, the value of it?
Right. So you can have a debt-based currency where the debt is created by the private banks as long as the money goes for highly productive means. So for example, if you come to Solari, we have a wonderful new report from Richard Werner on the sort of the banking model, and he talks about where banks originate productive loans. In fact, it's good for the economy and it's non-inflationary. What I'm talking about is sovereign issuance of debt by the sovereign to create the currency. And that's what put the governments in a debt trap and makes it easy for the bankers to control not only monetary policy, but fiscal policy. So if you issue currency directly for government expenditures, and the sovereign should have that power, then you don't have the problem. The issue of who owns the central bank is different. You can still have a debt-based currency issuing debt for the sovereign to create the currency, and have the central bank owned by the government as opposed to privately owned. I should note that the G20 just came out with a new declaration in full support of the BIS FSB framework, and one of the things they affirmed was the importance of the independence of central banks. What I hear when I hear that is, the central bank should be able to run things secretly on a non-transparent basis with lots of money disappearing. So this does not apply to Norway, but what does apply to the United States is the New York Fed is the depository for the US government. And between 1998 and 2015, literally $21 trillion went missing from the federal accounts. And so in our country, we have the New York Fed running the US government accounts in complete violation of the financial management laws and the Constitution. So again, it comes back to, think of the financial system as part of the governance system. Okay, so let's look at your household. If you're living with a family and the parents are running the household in a very criminal and inefficient way, the problem is not with the family budget. The problem is not with it's not a budgetary problem. It's a governance problem, right?
Right.
Right.
So you're saying that we could solve this financial problem by removing the ownership from the central banks, basically.
So here's what I'm saying. There is no financial solution to a political problem.
No, there's not.
Right. So
Yeah.
I used to be an investment advisor, and my clients would come to me, and what they wanted was a workaround. Everybody wants a workaround. They want to be protected from Mr. Global. They want to get away from Mr. Global. And what I used to always say to them, there's no financial solution for a political problem. Unfortunately, we're going to have to face, I went back and looked at my family history for the last couple hundred years. My family has been moving to get away from Mr. Global. And of course, it hasn't been working. And so now the time has come when we're going to have to deal with the political problem. And I'll tell you why. Finance and money are creatures of law. These are, money is a man-made tool, and it's defined by law. If our governance structure is behaving in a criminal manner and operating outside the law, and there's no law, then ultimately, financial assets have no value. You can have money and financial systems without law. And if you have a governance system that not only refuses to obey the law, but is changing the law to institute total central control, that is a political problem. And the only thing that can happen is if you'll see all my life, people will show up and say, the problem is financial. We need to reform the financial system. And here's this magic bullet. Every year there's a different magic bullet. There's this magic bullet. And the problem is, all those solutions do is make Mr. Global more powerful.
Exactly. I was just about to ask.
Right.
It's just for the benefit of Mr. Global as we...
So let me play this game. In 2019, the G7 central bankers went to Jackson Hole, where they meet every year, and they voted on the going direct reset. So that is what I think of as the reset. Most people think of the Great Reset but I think of Davos as sort of a marketing arm for the central bankers' reset, okay? So they voted for a reset, and what did they do next? and I'm going to grossly oversimplify just to create the framework. They injected the New York Fed, or the Fed injected $5 trillion. So dollar is the global reserve currency. They injected $5 trillion, and that $5 trillion was not distributed evenly to the people who hold the existing dollars, okay? So a lot of insiders got a lot of money. We know we created, I forget how many new billionaires we created, but it was a lot. So they inject $5 trillion. At the same time, they announce that they have to shut down all small businesses and farms, right? Lockdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one group of people gets $5 trillion, and the other group of people has their businesses shut down and their income shut down, except for, sort of what the government dribbled to them in small amounts, right? And now the people with the $5 trillion can buy up the assets of the people who are shut down for cheap, right?
Yep.
Right. It's called disaster capitalism. Okay. So and that reset was highly successful in terms of one part of the economy consolidating market share and control of the assets of the other part. So Wall Street got a tremendous advantage vis-a-vis Main Street, right? Mm-hmm. And that in total was part of an ongoing reset. And if you look at the numbers of how the dollar's doing or how the US stock market is doing, what I would say the feedback loop says it was successful.
So you've expressed in other interviews that the financial system has resets on intervals, and there is a lot of talk about the Great Reset. Klaus Schwab, I picture him as Mr. Global because he just looks like that Bond villain, talking about the Great Reset. And what you just said, you pretty much just said that this reset already happened with moving the capital from normal people basically into the people that already have a lot, shutting down small businesses. During the pandemic, we saw that happen. Many people went out of business. And this is one of their core, cornerstones of the World Economic Forum, is to get rid of small and medium businesses to get the big companies, big business to take over. But back to the resets, you say that these happens on intervals. So what is happening and how does this play into the Great Reset?
So my read of history, and I'm not a historian, and I've been trying to encourage lots of graduate students to take this on for the thesis, but my read of history is there's a pattern of resets historically, and it is associated both with using plague and pandemic laws to get central control to help engineer the reset, but it's also associated with evolution or changes in the currency system. So I think there's a pattern. Now, one of the interesting things is I completely agree with the central bankers that we do need a reset. And the reason we need a reset is we've moved tremendous amounts of capital to Asia and encouraged high growth rates in some of the emerging markets globally. That is putting tremendous pressure on resources, and in combination with a warfare and organized crime model, which is unbelievably parasitic and draining, you are looking at a model that is not sustainable economically. So there are many parts, and I'll go back and use the United States as an example. There are many parts of the economy that have a negative return on investment. It's kind of like a stock that goes down every year, and then you have to pump it up with subsidy. And that's because it's being run in a very unproductive way. And we need to change. So whether it's because we're trying to build a more globalized model, or because there is tremendous waste and corruption in the system, we do need to change. And I would argue, one of my favorite performance artists was Tina Turner, and she used to introduce one of her songs by saying, "We can do this nice or rough." And Klaus Schwab believes in rough. I believe in nice. The nice kind of reset is one where we bring the financial system back into harmony with the environmental and living systems. And living equity creates financial equity, which supports living equity, and the two have a prosperous relationship. So take it down to people. We help raise strong, healthy children, And those strong, healthy children go into the economy and create civilization. They create businesses, they create enterprise. If you look at the history of the North Sea and all the areas on the North Sea, that's what you see. But it starts by building strong, healthy children. And that's, so that's living equity. So family wealth protects and grows living equity, which then, the kids go off and create all sorts of wealth and, and hopefully where it's productive, it goes in a positive cycle. It's the same with our environment, with our water, with our air, with our trees. Our wealth comes from the earth. It comes from our natural resources. It comes from the food we grow. And so we need to create a financial system that has a win-win relationship with our living systems. And the little secret is particularly if you can combine new technology wisely, which we're not doing, but if we did, the wealth potential is so explosive. When I first realized how wealthy this planet could be, I'm an investment banker. You have to excuse me. I get very excited about wealth. And I just couldn't stop laughing for a week because there's no reason for poverty. Now, it means we have to grow up. And if you look at our culture, we are culturally, I would say we are way too primitive as a culture to achieve the kind of wealth that we could achieve. So part of a reset is culturally growing up.
So it's interesting that you say that, because when you look at the broader picture of what's going on in the Western world, particularly, I don't know how this accumulates in Asian countries and other countries. Like China is already there, basically, and not into the same extent that the Western world is. But we are destroying our children. We are confusing them, and we are teaching them not to be productive citizens. You're meant to sit around and question your gender and cut yourself and just have a miserable life and not travel
So I call it the great poisoning.
Yeah.
And the great poisoning is poisoning the food, poisoning our minds with all of what you're referring to, poisoning the water. It's a great poisoning. But all of that can be reversed. And to me, one of the most important things is to, our children are our future. They are our single most investment. And if you look at the finances of any community on the planet, the number one investment any community makes is raising and educating their children. So if you look at how much money we put into the school system, or how much money we spend, raising food to raise the kids, or teaching them on the weekends, on and on and on. But any economy of any place on the planet, the number one big investment is raising our kids. And if that investment goes wrong, then our society goes wrong, our culture goes wrong, and with it, our economy goes wrong.
Exactly. I don't know which end it started in here, but it started somewhere where children was not valued the same way anymore. And I can see the economic aspect of this as well, because Norway is a country of great welfare for our citizens. And so we have never been in we have been, but in modern times, never been in the position where we would have to birth children to be taken care of as old people.
Right.
But if you look to other countries in South Asia, for example, they do get a lot of children so that their future are secured for when they get older, right? It's their welfare system. And I don't know if this plays into Mr. Global's plans, but for sure, we're told that we're not birthing enough children in our country. And so instead of doing something about that, investing in family life and good values and making sure that we birth children and raise children to be productive citizens, we import people from the third world.
Right. And I think that's part of central control.
Yeah.
That makes it, the more people... One of the greatest pillars of freedom and democratic process is family wealth. So strong, healthy families create strong, healthy people and give people the wherewithal to be coherent, to think clearly and help govern. And so, family wealth to me is critical at kickstarting and rebuilding freedom and democratic process. If you want to destroy democratic process and institute central control, then you use migration as a weapon. And you do it to help you. So look at what we did in terms of the financial system in the 80s. Part of globalization was I inject massive amounts of money into the system in a way that it goes to the insiders, and I offset the monetary inflation by globalizing labor. So I get labor deflation offsetting the monetary inflation. In a way, that's what the pandemic was. We created labor deflation on Main Street in the small businesses, et cetera, to help offset the monetary inflation. But what you're doing is you're trying to create a population which is dependent and you control. And moving people around is part of doing that.
Exactly. And that takes us into the third question, Cathrine, because digital currency has, you said earlier on that a lot of people come up with ideas for a new economic system, but like you said, it's not you can't fix political problems with the different currency. But speaking to that, cryptocurrency came around 2008, 2009. It's been an idea that's been going on for a long time. It's not a new idea, but it came along, and a lot of people looked at this currency, if you can call it that, I don't know, this decentralized digital currency, which is not controlled by national central banks or other financial institutions, that this was sort of a leap or a path to freedom within the financial world and a way out of the quote unquote broken fiat money system, which you clearly stated is not really broken, but it's the policies that makes it the way it is. What's your take on this cryptocurrency? Is it a trap?
So Tim Wu, it's a prototype. Tim Wu is a professor, I believe, at Columbia, and he wrote a wonderful book on information technology. And what he showed was essentially for the last 200 years, you have this new innovation. It's wonderful. Everything blossoms. It really helps freedom. And then wham, it's consolidated into more central control. And then you have it, and it keeps happening on and on and on. So cryptocurrency was part of the wonderful blossoming of seeing what we could do to use digital technology and the internet for financial innovation. And, we are now approaching the period where we go wham. Now, I'm one of those people who believe that private currencies, whether it's community currencies or cryptocurrencies, could be absolutely wonderful things. The problem with cryptocurrencies is you're playing on the enemy's infrastructure, and you are also interacting with the enemy's financial system. And it is, I don't think most of the crypto people understand how easy it is for Mr. Global to assert complete control or to misuse cryptocurrency in very ugly ways. So to me, it's exceptionally important. I would love to see many more private currencies and much more freedom in people creating and using private currencies. I am absolutely for private currencies. But all of those currencies, whether a community currency or a digital currency or a cryptocurrency, are operating within that secret governance system, are often misused to help the secret governance system. And what we need to do as a group, whichever kind of private currencies we want to promote, is we need to understand that we want them to serve freedom, and they in and of themselves are not going to solve the political problem.
So I wondered about that. So we have cryptocurrency, we have local currencies. Some of our politicians in Oslo actually tried to introduce a local currency for one of our parts of town where they could shop and do
That's
things
great.
with it. But it didn't really work. But my question is, when you create a new currency, Cathrine, they'd still use the value of the fiat money to put a value to the new currency. How is that not contradictory?
Right, but you can also you can use the existing currency, but you can also use and there are places where using the existing currency makes sense, but you can also use other things. I mean, you could use food. You could use, in prison they use cigarettes. You can use gold. You can use silver. You can use you can use commodities. Now, throughout history, when fiat currency system gets corrupt, people turn to commodity-based currencies, so gold or silver, and they can work. I would argue in the history that the fiat currency is a more efficient system as long as you don't get into the, putting the sovereigns in a debt trap. So I would argue the debt-based is a problem. But I think what we need to understand is that, first of all, private currencies that are allowed to operate freely in an environment of freedom can really significantly improve economic health and performance. If they're operating in a system of total central control and tyranny, they will be used as a weapon. They will be weaponized. And what I would tell you, I've seen many proposals that weaponize gold and silver or weaponize Bitcoin, because I'm going to, again, grossly oversimplify. Now that Mr. Global has stolen all the money, of course, Mr. Global wants a sound money system because then he can keep all the money and keep everybody else shut out. I don't want that. And so we get back to the same old thing, which is any financial system that's reasonably designed can be run properly if well governed. If it's not well governed, there's no financial reform that's going to work.
Exactly.
And right. I mean, so the James Bond movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know Spectre. I don't care whether it's debt-based. I don't care whether it's fiat. I don't care if it's Bitcoin. If it's run by Spectre, we're in for a world of hurt. Okay.
So Spectre, or Mr. Global, we know he's a greedy narcissist. And that brings us to the next question, because now there's this thing called CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency. And Norway was a test country for this, together with the UK, I think Sweden and a few other countries, and they're ecstatic about this. What do you have to say about CBDC?
So the first thing to understand about CBDCs is it's not a currency.
Uh-huh.
It is not a currency. So a currency is something that has liquidity and is free to trade. This is a control system. It is a transaction control system. And it means your money can be programmed so that let's say they decide you should only wear red. You can't buy blue shirts. You know what I mean? You can, that you can only buy vegetables. You can't buy meat, or you can only buy lab-grown meat. So they can program your money, right? You have to eat bugs. So they can determine what your money can be spent on and where your money can be spent. And so if they don't want your money to work more than 5 kilometers from your home, it's not going to work more than 5 kilometers from your home. And if they want to turn it off or raise taxes, they just take it from your account. So it's interesting, the controller of the currency nominee 2 years ago never made it past her hearings, but she had suggested in a law review article that it was very easy for the central banks to stop inflation. They just freeze everybody's bank accounts, which they could do with CBDCs. Isn't that wonderful? So, I sent you the video of the head of the BIS describing CBDCs and him saying, we can make the rules and we can control and enforce them centrally. I mean, God love the central bankers. They're telling you what they're planning on doing. And I think the reason it's so hard for many people to understand is that we have grown up with relative financial transaction freedom. We don't understand that a world where there is no financial transaction freedom is a world of tyranny, the likes of which not only have we never experienced it, but we can't fathom anything that tyrannical and that invasive, because it's coming with highly invasive technology. And the central bankers have also told experts, I have in the collection I sent you of our videos on this, we had Richard Werner in Malmo, Sweden last year explain that he had been told by a top European central banker that they intended to put a chip in your hand. So we're talking about technology that is highly, highly invasive.
Yes, I reacted to the fact that you can't. So it's interesting that you say this is not a currency, it's a control system, because you can't really own any money in the system. You rent your, I guess, so-called value papers or tech from the central bank. So it's not really money, but they want this together with their digital health pass. Like we've already seen how this is in China with their social scorecards, right? And they also do digital currency, the Chinese government, and they can turn on and off the money and extract it from your account. And so my next question would be, what are the alternatives to avoid any of these systems? And I know you said that it's all about how it's governed, but how can we make sure that Mr. Global doesn't succeed in his greedy, narcissistic goals?
So, I always say crime that pays is crime that stays. And in most countries around the world, most of us have been going along. And we've been subsidized to go along. We've been encouraged financially to go along. And what we all need to start saying is, let's roll back digital control, because that's what we're looking at. We're looking at digital control. So let's rebuild the analog systems. And most importantly, now that the bubble of the debt has reached its pinnacle, there's a real fight certainly in the people who control the economy to get control of the real assets. And what we can all do is look at our daily budget and our daily life and say, whether it's food, whether it's energy, whether it's shelter, how can I build a more resilient life that is less dependent on central control? How can I stop interacting? So when I was an investment advisor, I remember I had one client who was constantly complaining about our water bill and the fact that the stock market wasn't doing very well. And I said, well, it's very easy. Take money out of the stock market. She lived in a rural area. I said, build a well. Cut out the middlemen. Just get them out of your life. So the more we can, and it's different for everybody. It's different depending on your skills or where you live or how much time you have. But the more we can dial back the central control in our day-to-day living, the more we can shift and move markets. There's a wonderful new video from Katie Hopkins in the UK celebrating the fact that cash has risen in the recent period by 7%. Cash use is wildly up. So I've been in Sweden for 2 days and no one will take cash. But in the United States, we still are, and cash use is clearly rising in North America. So anything you can do to walk back your dependency on the centralized systems and the digital systems is going to help.
Right. So when you come to Norway, Catherine, you can spend cash. We're not as bad as the Swedes, but we do. I do spend quite a bit of cash myself. But I've been looking into this over time. I think COVID was a big awakening for a lot of people as well, how to, I guess, decentralize yourself, spend cash and do. In Norway, we have something called redde, which is a collection of farmers and small businesses that you can shop directly from. And it's actually a really great story. The supermarkets didn't want to, there's a specific Norwegian apple and they didn't want it because they were changing it for something else. And they put out a message and it reached all the consumers. And so they made sure that this farmer was sold out of these apples that the stores didn't want in like seconds, basically. So that is absolutely fantastic. We can shop directly from farmers. We're, even though we're very good at being the best EU country, except that we're not a part of the union, which is kind of funny, we still have a lot of freedom from what the European Union countries, well, they don't have the same liberty, right? So
I think the most important thing we can all do, I call what's happening the great poisoning. Anything you can do to protect yourself and your family from being poisoned in all these different ways. But the most important is the food system. And I'm always telling people, support and finance your local farmers, not because it makes you money, but because you don't want to eat bugs. This is a really strategic, well, I told you, we just published this huge report called Pharma Food by a wonderful Dutch journalist named Elsa van Hamelen. And when you really go into a deep dive of how lab-grown meat is being created and grown, well, first of all, I defy you to eat for 24 hours after you've read this, but you will get very radical about supporting your local farmers, because if you look at where Mr. Schwab and his reset is going in terms of what you're going to eat, you can't go there. You can't go there, right?
But all of this is hitting us from different angles, Cathrine. We have the energy system. I don't know how aware you are of the energy system in Europe at the moment. Like, we have Norway was a self-sufficient energy nation, and we still are, with hydropower. We have oil, we have gas, and still they put us into the Acer agreement, and so we don't control our own power grid anymore, basically. Well, that's not completely true, but it's kind of true. And electricity prices has gone up. We're a country run on electricity, so we're bleeding money. Every household is bleeding money out of this. And it's the power, it's the food. They want us to eat bugs. They want us to eat vegetables, to go on, like you say, grab lab-grown meat. It's how they attack the children and breaking the children down. Like, they're coming at us from all angles. And then on top of it, with the vaccines, with the World Health Organization and their new little project of, the digital ID passes and all of this. So, you can feel a sense of when you first awaken to this, and you look around and you start digging and you start reading about all of this, it's easy to go into, I don't know how to express that in English, but you feel powerless, basically. So here's what we say at Solari. So we say there's an official reality and there's reality. Mm-hmm. And if you organize your expenditure of time and money according to the official reality, you're going to go in circles and you're going to be harvested, essentially. If, however, you take the time to get a map of reality, and I know that's what you're trying to do, is give people a map of reality, the first thing that happens is you have to go through a grief process, because, in many respects, the official reality is a lot more happy than reality. But the great thing about facing reality is then you sit down and you say, okay, where are my 10 best allies who are facing reality? And how can we get together and start organizing our investment of time and money so we start to build freedom from dependency on these systems which we can't trust? And you have to go at it. It's a day-by-day thing, and it's very bottom-up, because each situation is unique. And that's why I always tell people, don't worry if there is a conspiracy. If you're not in a conspiracy, you need to start one. And so the point of listening to you and getting a good map is then you realize, okay, it really is where Mr. Global is going is so bad that I just can't go there. So how am I going to find my allies? How am I going to find my tribe? And how am I going to start to move into something which is healthy for me and my family and my friends long term? And if you're willing to do that, it's a learning journey. If you're willing to do that, and enough of us do that, we're moving markets. We're moving markets. And that's, and you just do not want to be financially, you do not want your health care, your children, your finances to be dependent on Mr. Schwab and his friends. No. We can't go there. Right. Well, thank you, Cathrine. You're coming to Norway on Monday, and you're speaking in Oslo. You're speaking in Stavanger on Tuesday. Uh-huh. So what is it that we can expect from these two conferences, and what else?
So this is my first trip. I've always admired Norway, and I've always wanted to come because it's such a beautiful country. So I'm excited to be there. But I believe, my understanding is it's going to be a somewhat of a business-oriented audience. We'll have to see what the audience is. The first part will be a presentation to help people see, here's the official reality, but here's reality, and here's what it means to your time and money. Then what we're hoping is the second part will be very interactive so that we can dig in and if people, the first thing you've got to do is you got to get a good map. And I think it's very hard for people to fathom really how centralized, how controlling the centralizers want to be. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to fathom that it's going that way. So we'll see in the first part whether or not my map is shocking or understandable. And then in the second part, we'll simply go at, I'm very interested in talking about, okay, tactically, what do we do? Okay, this is Monday night, Tuesday morning, when I wake up, what do I do? And so it will depend on the audience, but we hope to have a very rich discussion. I love having a very open forum and a very open discussion.
Well, I look forward to that because I'll be in your audience, Cathrine. I think we have a picture of SpotCon. This is the website spotlight.org. You can go in and book your tickets for both the Oslo conference and the Stavanger conference there. And also, Cathrine, you have you've used your experience over the years to teach people how to build wealth, as you said in the beginning. And I absolutely love Solari's mission, and I'm quoting, is to help you live a free and inspired life. This includes building wealth in ways that build real wealth in the wider economy. We believe that personal and family wealth is a critical ingredient of both individual freedom and community health and well-being.
Right.
So, So I'm excited to hear that a part of that will be how you can use tactics, and you're sharing your wisdom with us as you do. From the Solari report, I think we have a picture of your website as well right here, so our viewers can go in and check it out for themselves. You said you deliver reports. The pharma food is one of them. How often do you deliver reports, and what sort of topics do you conduct?
What we do, and this came out of, I never meant to start the Solari report. I had terrible experiences with the corporate media, and I decided to just answer people's questions. So I would give out my email and I would respond and answer questions, and it grew and grew and grew. And finally I said, I need to hire staff because but what I discovered is people are busy. They don't have time to spend hours every day digesting the news. And so what we decided to do was every quarter, so 4 times a year, we would do a wrap-up that basically assessed what had happened over the last quarter. So we do a top stories, and it's called News, Trends, and Stories. We do top stories, and we do a series of audios and videos that really assess what has happened over the last quarter. And if you're a busy entrepreneur and you don't have time, our goal is that within a relatively short period of time, you can stay absolutely current with just a few 1 to 3 hours of your time. And that's done in audio videos. And then we also do a deep dive on a theme. So our last theme, the hard copy we just published, was pharma food. And we're just publishing one now. It's called The Future of Financial Freedom. And the next one is The Dutch Farmers. So, we do a lot on food and a lot on money. And the goal of that one primary theme is, I believe that if you can understand sort of the 20 to 25 top primary trends going on in the world, so for example, the move to central financial control, or the rise of Asia, or changes in the energy policies, if you can understand the primary trends, the long live trends that are going to go on for a while, you can watch a very confusing, incoherent world and make sense of it all. So we do that 4 times a year, sort of wrapping up the news. We do a wrap up on the financial markets because we tend to cover money, and then we go deep on one theme. And pharma food was, we like positive topics. Pharma food was arguably our most negative ever, but yeah,
I can imagine. How can you do that positively? How can you talk about pharma food in a positive manner?
Well, what I said, and we get a lot of feedback. One of the main complaints from our subscribers is, I want to buy all our food and support the local farmers, but my spouse says no, it's inconvenient or it's too expensive. So one of the things I said is, if we show them where the lab-grown meat and insects and bugs are going, then the spouse who wants to support the local farmers can give it to the spouse who doesn't and change their mind. So, okay, it's okay. Even if this is highly negative, it's okay if we do it.
Well, it is positive
Anyway,
too, Catherine, because changing how we shop is actually a big part of how we change the vision of the world that we want to live in, and it is all connected or interconnected. So this is, I think, a lot of people struggle with the fact that the financial system, the food industry, the medicine industry, all of these industries are connected through the financial industry as well, and it's all big business going around. So it's absolutely beautiful that you deliver these reports, and we'll link in our show notes your website and the video site so people can go see for themselves. So thank you for that, and really look forward to meeting you on Monday. So
I look forward to meeting you, and I'm going to try and find a copy of Pharma Food here so I can bring it and give it to you personally.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on our show, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you.